Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living podcast and YouTube broadcast. Thrive Co-Living is a new concept in creative community building. Sustainable, multicultural, multi-generational, and inclusive, Thrive Co-Living communities are built from repurposed big box stores or other suitable buildings. In this series, myself, Jennifer Hooper, and Thrive founder, Mark Stein, will weave together the tapestry that makes up the physical and spiritual components of this new concept in community living. Now on with the show. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Thrive Co-Living broadcast. My name is Jennifer Hooper and I am here with my co-host, Mark Stein. Mark, hello.
Hi there.
Mark is the founder of Thrive Co-Living Communities, and we have a guest with us today. This is Chris Steinocher, who is the president of the St. Petersburg Chamber of Commerce. Chris, hello.
Hey there, everybody. How are you doing?
Great. We're so glad that you could join us today and talk about Thrive and housing and all kinds of good stuff that we're going to get into today.
I'm looking forward to it. Looks like you're in a little treehouse yourself, so you're thriving up there in the treehouse.
That's right, exactly. Mark, why don't you kick us off today? I think you have a question or a story to share.
Yeah, so as many of the viewers know, I spend half of my time in the St. Petersburg area and the other half in Louisville, Kentucky, as the natives call it, Louisville to the rest of the world. And so 2 years ago this month, I made a conscious effort to build part of my practice, my marketing practice, which is my day job, in St. Pete. And I toured all of the chambers in Pinellas County, and it's a big county, and there are lots of them there. And the St. Pete Chamber was one of the ones about in the middle in terms of my exploration. And I went to a ribbon cutting, and Chris was there, and it was a new insurance practice. I've met the woman again a couple times, African-American woman that had her own health insurance practice. Anyway, so Chris is introducing her and talking about the chamber to the members there. And he said, you know, we are all in this together. We've got to support each other, and that was no surprise. But he said, we've got to love each other. We've got to love each other. And I've never heard a chamber president use that L word to talk about support. And it cut right through to me. It was really impressive. So it was more than just let's throw her business. It's let's embrace her as a business person and support her in any way that we can and love her. And so it was a verbal hug really to everybody in the room. And I was so impressed. And he had just hired a new membership director, and I signed up that week. So,
oh, what a good story.
It worked. Yay.
I love it.
Mark, thank you for sharing that, because that's how we feel. You know, like, as you know now, being a resident of ours, and for 2 years at 6 months, I'll give you a full year's worth of credit. So how about you've been a resident for a full year now? And with that comes a lot of privileges, but we're having a lot of fun. We know we're blessed. We live in paradise, but also the scale of St. Pete, as you know, while it's in a large metro area of over 4 million people, our St. Petersburg is this funky little burg. And, you know, we try to make sure that people understand that, because we're actually geographically located a peninsula on a peninsula. So we're very isolated. We could be very isolated. So for 120 years, I think we've built this culture of welcoming everybody who's here, because we count on everybody who's here. So we do say every great conversation in St. Pete starts with or ends with, I love St. Pete, because there's declaration, and it comes out, like I said, either at the beginning or the end of a conversation. It's kind of like the hello goodbye of our communities, because we are just wearing that on our sleeves, and then we really are trying to make sure that everybody does feel like they matter, that they are safe and they belong. I'm actually managing the chamber through what I call the Maslow's theory. If you know anything about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very top is what all the folks get excited about, because that's that self-actualization. That's all that creativity and innovation every community wants. But most communities, if they spent the time on the bottom part of that pyramid, which is making people feel like they're safe, that they matter, and that they belong, those really important parts of that pyramid, and they'll do the rest of it. And what we get to do at this chamber is just really build that kind of infrastructure, really build a place where you're going to see that person. Mark, when you're here, it's only 7 miles across. So like there's water on both sides. I will see you walking around. I will see you at our grocery store or the Publix. We will see each other. So the way we behave and the way we conduct ourselves in this community is super important. And this is not a transactional effort here. We say we're going to, St. Pete hosts about 7 to 10 million visitors a year. So we get a lot of consumers of our community, and we're looking for creators. So anytime you see me cutting ribbon, it means somebody's created something, somebody has put something, invest their own resources. And now our job is the easy one. It's to celebrate it, ensure there's folks there that understand what it is and get more of it. So what you got to see is what I call my favorite part of this job, which is just celebrating that spirit of that entrepreneur, that someone's willing to take a risk in our community and hire people and take down old buildings and create nice, beautiful things out of them. I don't know. That's the best job in the world, right?
I love that
But we
perspective. Yeah, because not artists are not the only creators, right? When you have a business, when you are an entrepreneur, you are creating something. And so for you as the chamber to embrace everybody in those terms, I love that.
Yeah, it's so much easier. We could spend our time looking for those companies that bring 1,000 jobs and we can get 1,000 people employed. I don't know who those 1,000 people will and would be coming from and who they would be, or I can spend my time just creating one job and that one person, and I know who that would be and we'll land them safely. So that's how we've spent our time in St. Pete, and right now it's really worked. I mean, we're a very desirable place to live right now. People want that kind of environment where they know that if they put out and do their best and are creative and follow their dreams, that maybe just maybe a community like ours will support them.
We had Peter Kajiyama on a few weeks ago talking about loving your cities, and he loves St. Pete the best. And so that leads me to an interesting question, I hope, and that is that there is something about St. Pete, and it's centered in downtown, in Central Avenue, but there's some spirit that's alive in the city that is so welcoming and so embracing and so open to new ideas. I mean, I could not have found a more fertile place, I don't think, than St. Pete. What is it that leads to that? And a lot of people are aware of it that come from outside. How does it happen?
I wonder. So here's my theory. I mean, so I've lived here about since 1987, so about a year or two out of college, and I fell in love with the same area. But there are places in this world that are magical. They call them energy vortexes. Many people hear of Sonoma. You always heard, oh, have you ever been to Sonoma? It just feels different. Well, St. Pete's one of those. One theory on that is, we're also known affectionately as the lightning capital of the world. There's more lightning strikes on our little peninsula here than anywhere else. So when you hear the thunder roar, you better get inside, because it's not, and I mean that, people are really serious about understanding the power of our community, and lightning is one of them. But when lightning strikes the ground, it actually creates negative ions, which is actually the grounding, is grounding for us. So like when people say, wow, he seems like a really grounded individual, that's part of that. So maybe maybe we are just, because there's a lot of theories that say water calms your mind, just being near it. There's the theory, it's called blue water. And then if you have all this lightning strike creating negative ions, maybe you really do have the chemistry for what we call the climate is right for business or living in general. So there might actually be some science behind why we're that place as well. But I know people came here over they also say we were one of the first places people came 500 years ago, and everybody's looking for that fountain of youth. So maybe there's something going on here, but that comes a lot of responsibility, especially for a chamber guy. I don't want to be the guy who screws that up. I mean, like, when you're in paradise and everybody's coming and things are going well, and so part of this is rooting for the good things and making sure we get to be that. And so that's been the fun, is let's not screw this up. Let's be the poster child for what a great American community can look like.
Wow, that's great. What a great mission.
Yeah.
So as the president of the chamber, you obviously have a lot of awareness about what's going on with business, retail, commerce, those kinds of things. And I would imagine that you also have insight into housing in your community, which may be a little less obvious, connection, I guess, to business. But when you think about, the businesses, people have to live somewhere, right? So what do you think are some of the current unmet needs in housing in your area? Could you give us
Sure.
any insight about that?
Well, I appreciate the question, Jennifer, because that's what our chamber spends a lot of time on, are the things. Again, remember, if I said we're working on safe, matter, belong, what's the first thing when you think about that? You want a home if you're, if you're safe or matter or belong, or you want a place to work or live and play or do both. So place is really important to us. In fact, we have 5 leadership objectives, and place is obviously one of those, in the top 3 of those, because you've got to have it. And we say it's got to be a space for you. There's so many different kind of spaces, and that's why actually, when Mark first came to me and said, "Hey, I've got some crazy ideas," I go, "I bet you I got more crazy ideas than you do," and then he proceeded to prove me wrong with a lot more crazy ideas than I did, we are studying housing in all its forms, because we need it for every level of our economy right now. We are trying to be an inclusive community. And since I am on a peninsula, I got to be really careful, and I've only got so much land. I can't just build another subdivision, the next, the next exit down the interstate, and that's how many great communities in the South, especially, were developed, right? I grew up in Atlanta. I mean, that was just, let's build a perimeter and let's build another perimeter and let's just start, putting down things. And Pinellas County and St. Pete just have had to think differently all the way. And now, because I just told you this wonderful story of an attractive place where everybody's dreams can come true, people want to be there. And so we are really battling with the notion of, how do I balance my growth so that I'm not the story of other markets like mine. There's markets like a Naples, which really, when it grew successful, it outgrew its infrastructure plays. So like the teachers and the firemen and the police and the nurses and the folks who worked at the Publix weren't able to live there. And so they critically said, oh my gosh, now we've got people not even living in our community, teaching our students and, our kids when they go home. Well, that creates a whole nother set of issues. While it certainly, the whole drive to qualify kind of mentality that America has put up with, it does something to your community that we're not going to have anything to do with. Is if those people who take care of you and I, when we're sick or when our kids need to learn something, if they have to drive out of this community every night because they don't feel like they actually can afford to live there, you've lost something. You're going to lose that real vibration that people want to be around. So we're working hard to make sure we understand what affordable means for everybody, what workforce housing means for everybody, and just the best way to do that. So, and I'm nervous that we do it correctly. I think left to our own devices, especially now after what our community and our country and our economy have been over, left to our own devices, Florida can be seen as a land grab for the rich. Like it really could be that place where, because there's enough wealth, and I told you just how beautiful, how cool St. Pete is. Left to its own devices, it could be a place where a chamber guy couldn't even afford to live in it. And so we are hell bent on making sure that we mix this properly and get all the kind of solutions. And that's going to require a lot of creativity.
So are you currently seeing any unmet needs, or you're kind of at this equilibrium place where most people are able to?
No, we've got unmet needs on every level. Every level right
Okay.
now is suffering, and it tends to be. So we, while we are a beautiful place to visit, and I actually did get to the beach this weekend. I mean, it's been 1 year, but I actually got to the beach. So we, sometimes I usually say I haven't even been to the beach. We are attracting a lot of professional jobs. In fact, it's even in this last 6 months since COVID, we created more jobs in our high wage jobs than the rest of the country did in jobs over $60,000 a year. Now that's not, we want to balance that out with growth in all of them, because our hospitality and retail got hit hard. But I'd be honest with you, Jennifer, and I'd say I think it's the professional looking to get started in our community, the professional looking to retire in our community, and it's the student trying to get his family or her family into a high wage income effort. So I think it's across the board.
That's a perfect segue for Thrive.
And let me tell another story
Yeah.
about Chris, and then let's hear from him about it. So I scheduled a meeting with him, and I sent him an outline about Thrive. And I'm in the meeting room first, and he comes in and he says, "I've read all about it. Nothing like this exists anywhere, and I want the first one to be here, and I will do anything I can to help you make that happen." So
Oh,
I didn't even get
amazing.
one word out of my mouth, and he is embracing it. So,
Awesome.
and I've never had that response before. Generally, there's something about this combination of co-living and repurposing big box stores that really grabs people, but never have I not even gotten to explain it before somebody's on board. So thank you for that warm welcome. But tell us what grabbed you about it initially.
Well, yeah, first of all, it's a great idea. I mean, like when you know it when you see it, and again, like I said, here in St. Pete, we are trying so hard to not just be that same place, like where you could close your eyes and wake and open them and you could be anywhere. So we are looking to be creative, and when you showed me where you were doing it and what you were doing, just because, again, we know this community so well. When something just fits well, you just know it's going to fit well. And I just feel like those are the kind of ideas and opportunities that St. Pete, the culture is like, yeah, let's try that. There's got to be some kind of like, well, in fact, we say, in St. Pete, we have a saying that says St. Pete's just weird enough. Like cause we see our Austin go, keep Austin weird. We're like, that's cool. But we had when we were relocating a company from San Francisco, an IT company, their husband and wife, we had driven them through some of our neighborhoods just to get them a chance to see what it was like, and through some of the cool, funky business districts. And by the time we were over with, we asked the wife, I go, so, what did you think? And she goes, I think it's just weird enough for me. And I was like, I want to use that as our slogan, and use that as your slogan. I'm like,
It's perfect.
And so when you said, hey, this is what we think we can do, I'm like, yeah, that's St. Pete. That's just weird enough that would work. But also because of this sense of community that we're trying to build. I really believe that safe, matter, belong is what everybody needs anyway. And my wife and I have a mental health practice in town called Mind Body Lab, where that's what she does for a living. And I know that that's like the number one critical need even going forward in our country is going to be mental health. And how do you identify it, and how do you work to ensure that you can help folks with that? Well, what I saw quickly in yours is, here's somebody who used innovation design to solve what I think is going to be our number one health crisis in America, which is mental health. So if you can use innovation design to solve one of your bigger crises coming up, then the market should be able to figure out how to really make that work. So what I saw, your concept was, using great innovation design to solve an issue that is big, which is mental health. And people, believe it or not, really do need each other and need some connection with each other. And I think, opportunities like yours, just to me, was like, wow, that solves a lot of opportunities for us.
And especially as a subset of mental health, this, what I refer to and a lot refer to as an epidemic of isolation. And that didn't just start with COVID. That's been going on with technology and membership and attendance at churches is generally way down, and civic participation. So
yeah, how long ago was that book, Bowling Alone? I mean, there was a book called Bowling Alone. It must have been about 15 years ago when they were starting to really say, gosh, as people moved out into those suburbs, they really started to isolate themselves. And that book was written before social media. And then with the advent of social media, people didn't join that bowling league because they said, oh, well, I can just hang out here and get everything I need. And then they're realizing they're not. And what we're learning from this time in COVID and this self-isolation too, is what mental health practitioners always have known, but now we're all learning it, is that this exchange you and I are having right now, if we were having it inside a room, our body chemistry would actually be completely different than it is today. So we aren't releasing the feel-good hormones that we do when we actually have close proximity to each other, and so. It's just exacerbating this notion. But for folks like what you all are doing, which is trying to build community again, but also try to, provide a solution for those, at a price point and utilizing real estate that's already there. So to me, I think that's kind of that winning combination of where people are going. So yeah, I don't know if you guys were really trying to figure out how to really work on mental health and isolation, but and I know you couldn't have planned an epidemic to prove your point, but I think now you have that. It's time to figure out how to innovate in housing, and you guys had spent the last couple of years doing that prior. So I think it did put you guys in good shape.
Yeah.
Is there any part of Thrive that particularly sort of lights you up inside, or is there anything that you think could be added that hasn't been thought of when you think about Thrive co-living?
No, I think, what I think, I called Mark right away, or we talked early on, even when COVID was going on. I was like, wow, what does this do for you? And you're like, well, we're going to wait and see. And I liked his idea of just like, I think we're confident in our product and we know what we're doing. And I was nervous just about what does it mean? Would people really go towards self-isolation in a bigger way, in a mindset? But having now understood, what we've seen happen, and understanding now how people, I don't know how the schools are doing where you're at up in Maine, but where we have opened our schools last couple of weeks, and people thought the sky was going to collapse. And while our numbers are still not where we want them to be, they're at about 2.5% of our total testing each day. We want to get it under 2%, ideally 1% or less, where we were a while back. People have learned a lot about just how do you stay safe, how do you navigate through this, how and when are good situations to be with a smaller group and not, so the world to me has changed even in the last couple of months, where people know they need you know, that this ability to be safe, but also need some of this shared experiences that we're feeling. And I think what a Thrive community does is actually create a safer kind of environment for that, right? It could give you what these folks were experiencing, which is extreme isolation in some markets, and then which could be really dangerous, but also just that opportunity. So I don't know, man. So I would say that I think that as we all come out of this shock and awe of, wow, I got to make sure I'm in places that are safe. That's what people are going to find, and they're going to go look for location, you know, geographies and that are safe and places that are safe. And so the brand of St. Pete right now, I think we navigated pretty well, and we're seen as one of those communities that really cared and masked up and took care of each other. So I think this is a natural product for that kind of market.
That's awesome. We have had a previous guest who shared, you know, she lives in a co-living community, and it's smaller than the Thrive concept, but they isolate together, and they go and have activities and do hiking and things together. So I think that is such a nice synergetic way to stay safe and have community and connection. And so I do think this co-living concept really lends itself to the
And
situation.
I'll say that I was pleasantly surprised that our basic concept holds up even during the heat of COVID, the worst parts of COVID, and that is that because each of the units is independent in and of itself, kitchen, bathrooms, a couple of bedrooms, so that those who were having to go in and out could just isolate there. And those, I believe that there'll be a lot of people who are tech nomads, retired artists that are working at home, and uh, a group of us could have just sheltered in place, have everything brought in, and agreed during the worst part of it not to go out, and we would have been able to stay together and not miss a beat in that regard. So I think, and then in between, because it's the interior of the box would be so spacious that it would be easy to keep the distance apart, and with masks and still be able to socialize. So yeah, I certainly made it. And the irony of promoting a co-living concept in the middle of the pandemic has not escaped me. Uh, but like you, I think it's letting people know just how important human connection is, and when we're a little further along, um, people will crave it even more.
Yeah, and you guys can show and if as you lean into safety of your community environment, I mean that's going to be like a sales pitch. Is like, hey, and if anything like that happens again, let me tell you what we do, and this is how our community will work together to, you know. So to me, that for folks who realize they were on their own a little bit, maybe they will be looking for a place that they're not necessarily, they can be on their own if they want to be, but they don't necessarily have to be. So I think that I mean it, Mark. When I remember talking, April or May, going, "Wow, I don't know what to tell you next." And you're like, "No, you never know, man. This could all work the right way," and it certainly broke the right way. I really believe that, and I give you guys a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Aspects that's grown, and we've been spending this time really refining the concept, bringing new people in, really from all over the world. We had Penny from London last week, a co-living software developer from India a couple of weeks ago. But one of the new aspects that's really developed is that we had someone on who has a high aquaponics, business, actually near me in Louisville. And he came on and talked about the beauty of hydroponics and aquaponics, which is adding fish to the ecosystem. And we're really enthused about it, especially for, well, really all of the sites that we're looking at to develop have plenty of space. So to be able to provide fresh produce and fresh fish to our residents and probably have some extra to sell to neighborhood restaurants and to the public has been a fun addition to the concept. And I don't know how far we had developed that concept when we talked at
No,
first.
I don't think we had, but I can see that being a big piece of that working out quite well. And actually, if you do it here, you're going to have some neighbors who are pretty good at it right now. There's some aquaponics going on just south of us where they're actually doing sturgeon and doing some of the best caviar that is being labeled for some of the biggest brands around the world. Yeah, that's a neat piece of it too. But any of those kind of activities allow your whole community to play with it too, and those are the kind of things I bet everybody would want to play with. If someone else would do a lot of the work, but they could do some of the work on it, I think those are the kind of things we'd all be interested in. I mean, you know, Jennifer, I'm going to leave you out of this, but I bet you Mark and I remember playing in gardens, like really actually, just like doing those kind of community efforts, or and your neighbors and friends would be around or whatever. Like
Why are
that.
you leaving me out of this?
Yeah,
My parents had a garden every single summer,
Yeah.
so I was out
Okay.
there
Cool.
weeding and planting and
Okay. I
reaping
just
the
didn't want.
harvest.
I just thought you looked so young that maybe you
Oh
just
my God.
have
I love you.
all the opportunities that old guys like us had to do. But
Yeah.
what where I was getting to that is some of that built like some values that that reinforce the values about taking care of things, and those things happen to be your community, like the dirt and the food and the bunny rabbits and everything else, and that's part of your community. So and so that's why one of the first things we did at this chamber when I got here 11 years ago is we started a sustainable urban agriculture coalition, just because I really
Nice.
believe if you can teach someone to garden, that backyard garden, that urban garden, that sell the kale to your friend kind of
Mhm.
business, that's awesome work if you can do it, and everybody can grow something, but it teaches you so much more about yourself and about what we're all about. And so that's what, again, that Maslow's notion of letting a community see all those things, and Thrive can do that. So Thrive has that best opportunity to provide people the exposure to all those things they're looking for in community.
and not just be uh, sustainable in terms of the environment, but sustainable in terms of being a producer and not just a consumer. Another thing that's been evolving is a mediation program. Certainly, Thrive is going to be ripe for conflict with 100 families living relatively close together and a lot of different energies and personality types. So we want to have an in-house mediation program and train the residents to become mediators for our internal disputes, but also um, to be able to have those that become very skilled to mediate disputes within the larger community and invite people to bring their disputes in and use it as a revenue source to help support the community. So doing some production to provide some of the expense.
Wow, I love it. And you can actually have some partners on that. If you look up World Cafe St. Pete, we're actually starting next week training people in this community on what the World Cafe is, which is a mediation is a conversation technique to get folks to sit down and talk, 4 people at a table, knee to knee, talking about it. And the World Cafe is going to be training 40 folks in St. Pete, and then those folks can help create great conversations in our community. So you're on that same wavelength, Mark. So I'd love to turn you on to those folks, and maybe as you guys we can get more, because the more folks, we're trying to build a civil community where we're actually listening to each other and sharing each other's ideas back to each other, so we can make sure we get heard. So, wow, if you guys can offer that as part of those, things that your community does, then maybe you guys can help. If we all just did things like that, maybe this world, will make the turn we're all hoping for, and we'll all, do it. So, but it's got to start somewhere, and I'm glad it's starting in your community. So thank you.
Yeah, and I've got a notepad full of notes and resources that you've given us here today. So thanks so much for that.
Right on.
From a selfish point of view, I hope the first Thrive co-living community is in St. Pete, because I think I'd like to live there. I love entrepreneurship and creativity and the ocean and vortexes, so I don't see any downsides.
As long as you're not outside for the lightning strikes,
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
I think you're in good shape.
True. Awesome. Let's see, Mark, anything you want to add at this point?
Why don't we ask Chris if there's anything else that he wants to talk about concerning your work and what's happening in the community and
Sure.
all
Yeah.
that.
So the only part that I would say is, again, as we wrap up, is I think you guys have taught me a lot, Mark, of what you guys are, how your guys are looking at this, and I really do think it's awesome and noble, and something we all need to do. And I would say, here in St. Pete, and here in my heart too, is I'm really trying to make sure we're an inclusive community where equity really is, approached differently than it has in the past. And so, for a chamber guy's perspective, is I know that probably anything that a Chamber of Commerce did over the last 120 years might have been baked in with some practices or or some policies or some narrative that caused some of the world we're in right now. So I guess I'd put it back on you, or ask you, or just say, hey, as you are building these communities, make sure that you understand what inclusivity really is now, and how do you make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and so like when you just talked about that mediation and whatever, I'm really curious how you design communities so that all the things we've learned about in America right now, you bring to the table in an open mind, because I think St. Pete's trying to get there. We really want to figure out how the next step we make is towards not being a place that's filled with bias and hate, but filled with love. And so I would just ask you, or how's that, how do you guys see yourselves contributing to that? Or if you haven't ready for that question, just be that place that can contribute to the positive conversations we're trying to have.
Well, thank you for that. And um, some of these people that I'm just mentioned that we've been talking with really have a solid core around the concept of community, and some that have traveled to numerous co-living communities around the world, some that live in them. And one of the things that I'm wanting to get together with these folks to do is develop a software platform, a communication platform that fosters all of these connections. And so I'm going to try to convene a group to do that. And because co-living is really growing fast. South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, India, there's a lot of growth and a lot of interest. Some are more focused on just housing people, and some that are smaller are more focused on how do you build community. And none of them, so I think, and it's interesting that, we're talking about the sense of isolation, and technology has helped to build and foster that sense of isolation. But I think that the right communication platform for a co-living community, including things like a calendar, of course, to show the events and make them prominent for people, but also a chat feature that lets people say at 2:00 in the morning, hey, who'd like to share a pizza with me in the courtyard? or who wants to go kayaking at 2 o'clock on Saturday? So how do we foster those connections? A profile piece that's much more intimate than what anyone would share on Facebook. Here are my passions. Here's some of my artwork. Here's what I love to do. Here's my favorite poem, and maybe have different levels that where people can say, okay, I'd like to open up level 3 for this person. You know, maybe I only want to share this part up here with everybody, and then as I get to know people, let's let them go deeper into what my passions and loves are. So that's one of the things. And I know software can't create it all, but I think it can foster it. And I think those who are involved in supporting have a good sense of what this spirit of acceptance and embrace feels like. So.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to give you, I was going to start you off with a C, because you can't solve social issues with technology, but you came around and got it good at the end there. So I'll give you, I'll let you have that technology can make you feel good. And I know you're going to get there. And I do think it's about like a kind of tolerance and exception, but also like just as how do you share the real dialogue we need to have? Like, if you're gonna live next to me, why are you showing such hate and you don't realize it right now? Kind of conversation. And do you know your words right now don't sound the way they think they do to me? And can I work with you on that so that we can be great neighbors and not just tolerant neighbors? And so I think what we're trying to do in St. Pete, there's something called the Courageous Conversations that we're having, where our Foundation for a Healthy St. Pete brings about 40 folks, or 40 or 50 folks through it each quarter. And it's just about how do you talk about those issues that we're seeing in the nightly news every day right now, with your neighbor, with your family, with your coworker. And so I would just encourage, Thrive to think about, how do they want their neighbors to talk to each other? And isn't this an opportunity to set the bar pretty high about, hey, we're having the real conversations in our community, and don't you want that too?
Wonderful.
I love that. Great feedback. Thank you.
All right. That was fun, guys.
Right.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. At this point, I would like to invite our listeners from the podcast or our viewers from YouTube to go check out our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. We have a GoFundMe campaign currently underway, as well as merchandise for sale, great t-shirts and masks. And didn't you say a dog coat or something? What was it? Yeah. We got to get one for Anubis. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon.
And Chris, thank you so much for being with us. And we'll put a lot of these resources that you've given us in the notes, and your contact information. So thank you so much for all that you're doing.
Oh man, like I said, thank you guys for even considering having me on. Mark, thank you for doing your project in St. Pete. And if anyone wants to come live, work, or play here, stpete.com. Check us out. We still have room for 1 or 2 more. So come on down.
Well, maybe after I sign up, only 1 more. All right. Take care.
Thank you guys. All right. See you soon.
Bye. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Thrive Co-Living podcast and YouTube broadcast. To discover more about our mission, activities, and how to find us on social media, please check out our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. There you can also learn how you can support this creative vision in community co-living. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon.